Okay, let's look at solving these equations. We look at problem A and we see our equal sign is here, so we draw our river. And the river helps us to focus on whichever side the variable is on. Okay, so we automatically look over here on the left side. So we don't really care what's going on over here. We're just looking over here because this is where the n is. And the n is what we want to get by itself. So we need to get rid of this 2.4. Right now it's being subtracted, and so in order to get rid of it, we add. So we're going to add 2.4 to both sides. And I'm going to line up my decimals just to make sure that I know what I'm doing here. Okay, and so these will cancel out, right? They're opposites, so they are gone. And what I have left here is n, which is exactly what I wanted. Now I come over here, and this is where a lot of you had some trouble. You have to ask yourself, are the signs different or the same? And since this is a negative and this is a positive, we know that they're different. And when signs are different, we subtract. Okay, so we know we're going to subtract. Now, when we subtract numbers, we put the bigger number on top. So I'm going to come up here maybe where I have some room, and I'm going to put 2.4 on the top and 1.7 on the bottom. And when you write it this way, if you're not trying to do it in your head, which is difficult to do, when you write it out, you will see, oh, yeah, I need to borrow. I can't take 4 minus 7. That doesn't give me 3. That's what a lot of you said. I need to come over here and borrow. So the 2 becomes a 1 and the 4 becomes a 14. And now 14 take away 7 is 7. And the decimals here, and 1 minus 1 is nothing. So my answer is 0.7. And my final question for myself is it a positive zero point 0.7 or is it a negative zero point 0.7? And in order to know that, we look to see which one is the bigger number, and 2.4 is the bigger number and it's positive, and so my answer is positive. Okay, so now to check it, I just plop this bad boy right in here into my parentheses with a parenthetical promise. So instead of n, I'm going to put zero point 0.7 or 7/10. Okay, and now I actually do the work. I really truly do it. All right, so I can't do zero point 0.7 minus 2.4, but I can leave, change, opposite. Leave, change, opposite. And then I say, oh, okay, these signs are different. That means I need to subtract them. So maybe I'll come down here. I'm going to subtract, which means 2.4 needs to go on the top and zero point 0.7 is going to go on the bottom. I'm subtracting. Again, I need to borrow. This should look pretty familiar to you at this point. Okay, so that becomes a 14, and 14 minus 7 is 7, and 1 minus nothing is 1, and the decimal comes down. I get 1.7, and then I ask myself, what sign does it need to have? Well, 2.4 is the bigger number, quote unquote bigger. It's negative, so my answer should be negative. I even put this arrow here to remind you guys that all you do with this number is you just bring it down. And then you just ask yourselves, does this work? Did this check out? Well, yeah, negative 1.7 is equal to negative 1.7, so I know that I'm right. Okay, let's look at B. So I'm going to draw my river. I'm looking at this side here with a P, and I ask myself, all right, what is going on here? Right now, the P is being multiplied. So in order to get rid of this number, I divide. What do I divide by? I divide by the number I'm trying to get rid of, which is negative 0.08. Lots of you decided to divide by a positive, but that's not going to get rid of it all, right? Because a negative divided by a positive is going to give you negative, and p is not by itself then. We need it to go away. So we divide both sides by negative 0.08. Okay, so those cancel out. I'm left with p by itself. And I'm going to have to do the work here. So maybe I'll come up here in this empty space and I will do my division house. The first number makes it inside the house. The last number gets stuck outside. I'll worry about the signs at the end. Okay? So whenever I divide by decimals, I've got to move it over so that it's at the end. So it looks like I moved it over twice, which means I need to move this over twice, which means that I'm going to have to add in here a 0. And so my decimal comes up, and now I'm ready to rock and roll. All right, 8 doesn't go into 1, but 8 goes into 16 twice. 2 times 8 is 16. I bring down this 0, and 8 goes into 0, of course, 0 times. And you don't have a remainder or anything, so we're done. So the answer would be 20, but of course my final step is, do I need a negative? Well, this is a positive, this is a negative, the signs are different, so my answer should be negative. Okay, now I plop this bad boy into my parenthetical promise. So in the place of P, I'm going to put a negative 20. And now I really do the check. So I'm going to multiply. I'm going to multiply 0.08. I'm going to worry about the signs at the end, times 20. Okay? Well, 0 times 8 is 0 and 0. Then I go to the next line. I put down a 0, which should look like that. 8 times 2 is 16. Carry the 1. And then that's a 1. And so when I add all these together, of course, I get 160, and I count the digits behind the decimal. 1, 2, 1, 2. So I get a 1.6, and then I ask myself, well, what happens when I have a negative times a negative? I get a positive. And now I bring down this number over here, and as long as these match up, I know that I'm right.